Good afternoon. Robert has nicely done my welcome for me, but I will still read a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this commemoration of lives lost long ago. But remember, here and in Talladega, Alabama today, in the spirit of good old Scottish school, roll call, I'd like to let you know who is here today. So please lift your hand when I call your name. Warden and our Mayor, Paul McQueen. Our Deputy Mayor, Akash Desai of Grey Highlands. I'll get him before you. Patricia Lorenzo Faulkner, Vice Chair of the Owen Sound Emancipation Festival. Reverend Chris Lang, Pastor, Dundalk Wesleyan Church. Chris and his family live in Markdale, and it's not the accent, people. He is the descendant of a minister at Ainsley Methodist, now the United Church. Dr. Naomi Narke, Chair of Old Durham Road Pioneer Cemetery Committee. Rob Laverty, Executive Director of the Ontario Historical Society. Rob and his family have been in Grey Highlands residence for more than 40 years. Kevin Arthur Land, Board Chair of the Grey Highlands Public Library, of which I'm a member. Colleen Bohr, Board Chair, South Grey Museum and member of the Grey Highlands Peace Committee, along with myself and so many others. Robert Antorno, Cultural Heritage Curator, South Grey Museum and member, Grey Highlands Peace Committee. Jane Gibson, sitting over there, is the meeting chair of the Owen Sound Emancipation Festival. Barry Penhill, Director of the Owen Sound Emancipation Festival, over there. Jane and Barry have also been very active leaders in the Friends of the South Grey Museum Group. John Butler, the genius behind this, that's done all the contacting and arranging, and without him, it would not be like it is today. It's going to be very successful and very memorable. June Butler, over there, wife of John Butler, member of the Friends of the Grey Highlands Public Library. Joan John and Robert Shaw, newly arrived community activists in Grey Highlands. They're actually in Durham, in Southgate, and friends of mine. Last but definitely not least, Greg Hogg, videographer, Grey Highlands Public Library. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, everybody. And thank you to all the others for being here. There are many museum members of the board here too, I can see. Have I missed anyone? Since this commemorative project began, several of our friends have carried out additional research into the lives of William and Fanny Lowe and their families and communities. I would like to recognize them whether they're here today or not, and ask you show them your appreciation after I've named them, and if I've forgotten anyone, please forgive me. Those that have helped: Dr. Naomi Narke, Chair. Naomi. Wilda Allen, I don't see Wilda here. She is the Chief Librarian and CEO, Grey Highlands Public Library. Jane Gibson, of course, I've introduced. Nancy Matthews is the Chair of the Heritage in Grey Highlands. Nancy's not here. Robert Tarno, okay. Cultural Heritage Curator of South Grey Museum. John Butler, Grey Highlands Peace Committee, again, the researcher and did everything back for this day. And Anne Finley Stewart, editor and publisher of Owen Sound Herald. Is Anne here? Thank you. I didn't introduce myself. I'm Lynn Silverton, the chair of the Peace Committee, and proud to be so, and proud to be on the museum and the library boards and the chamber and other things. I will now ask Mayor Paul McQueen and Deputy Mayor Akash Desai to bring greetings from our federal provincial elected members who were invited but due to other obligations that were unable to come. Paul, Akash.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a letter that was written from Alex Ruff to us here today. Warden, Mayor McQueen, distinguished guests, everyone gathered here today. I wish I could be in attendance today. Unfortunately, due to prior commitment, I am unable to attend this commemoration of a tragic racial lynching that took the lives of a number of Black Americans, including the life of Canadian William Luke from Artemisia Township, Grey Highlands, 150 years ago. William Luke was hung for teaching and promoting equality among Black people. Just let that sink in for a minute. He was lynched for teaching and promoting that we are all equal. As an officer serving the Canadian Armed Forces on operations around the globe, I've seen firsthand that heroism, bravery, and leadership are not determined by race, sex, religion, sex preference, age, or privilege. In my eyes, William Luke was a hero we can all learn from. As a member of the Parliament for Bruce Grey Owen Sound, I am committed to the proposition that every one of us needs to learn from the past in order to create well-being and justice for today and for the future. May all of us in Grey Highlands and Talladega, all of us from Canada and the United States, learn from the tragedy of July 11th, 1870. May we all use this to learn and create a safer world rooted in opportunity and justice. My thoughts are with you. Signed by Alex Ruff, Member of Parliament, Bruce Grey Owen Sound.
Thank you. I'm honored to bring words from Bill Walker, MPP for Bruce Grey Owen Sound. Good morning. As a member of Provincial Parliament for Bruce Grey Owen Sound, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you for the invitation to bring greetings from the Government of Ontario to today's event. Although a prior commitment prevents me from joining you at the July 11 commemoration of the deaths of William Luke and his confrères 150 years ago at the hands of the Ku Klux Klan, I want to extend to you my admiration for commemorating this tragedy. As you know, the history of the establishment of human rights for Black Ontarians has been intertwined with the history of our American friends. Many citizens here in Ontario can trace their roots to people held in captivity, both within the United States and the British Empire. It is no accident, then, that Owen Sound is home to the world's longest continually running Emancipation Festival. It is no accident, then, that the old Durham Road Pioneer Cemetery in Grey Highlands has been rehabilitated to commemorate a vibrant African-Canadian farming community. And it is no accident, then, that your cross-border commemoration of William Luke and his companions is being held. In 2012, the late Lincoln Alexander, Canada's first Black Member of Parliament and Ontario's first Black Lieutenant Governor, said, "We've come a long way. There are still people who think like Neanderthals, and racism is still here, and there's still disrespect for women and people of other religions. But at the same time, we've made tremendous strides in the plight of minorities affected by skin color and race. As Link said, "We've come a long way. We are not at our destination yet. But your commemoration reminds us that Canadians and Americans still walk together toward that destination." Sincerely, Bill Walker, MPP for Grey Highlands South.
Thank you, gentlemen. Just as two of our municipal leaders that you've just heard in Grey Highlands have taken time to be at our commemoration today, at this same moment, two of Talladega's municipal leaders are attending a commemorative event at William Look's grave in Talladega, Alabama. We thank Warden and Mayor Paul McQueen and Deputy Mayor Akash Desai for being here. We also thank Mayor Timothy Ragland of Talladega and Talladega Ward 1 Councillor Reverend Dr. Horace Patterson for giving time today to honour a Grey Highlands native son, William Look. I'm now asking that John Butler come and give the story of the tragedy.
Thank you, Lynn. By the way, I discovered this morning with some interest that this podium behind which we're speaking was actually a podium from a Sons of Temperance Lodge in Grey Highlands. And Robert Yantorno tells me that somewhere in here there's a ceremonial sword. I haven't been able to find it, and I'll reassure you that I'm not looking for it. Oh, sorry, Lynn. Before I tell you William Luke's story, I should say that yesterday I met by phone Dave Armstrong. Dave is a descendant of the Irwin family. William Luke's wife, Fanny, was an Irwin. Dave is passionate about his family's history. In November of last year, Dave visited William Luke's grave in Talladega, Alabama. He has agreed to help us to more fully understand the lives of Fanny and William. Louder?
Yes, closer to the mic, please.
Oh, okay, thank you. Robert's a great MC or director in the background. Dave is right now watching the live stream of this commemoration, so welcome, Dave. And now to William Luke. William was born in 1833 in Ireland and raised in Artemisia Township, now part of Grey Highlands. He became a Wesleyan Methodist minister in 1855 and successfully served several congregations before returning to Artemisia to marry Fanny Irwin, daughter of a prominent local family. He and Fanny accepted a position serving a newly created congregation in Eganville in the Ottawa Valley, a congregation strongly opposed by Lutherans in the town. After an accusation of adultery was directed at William, he was suspended and then expelled from the ministry by Wesleyan Methodist officials in 1863. Irwin family members later claimed the accusation was false. For the next 6 years, William, Fanny, and their growing family lived in Flesherton. They raised a family and William worked as a teacher. The family joined the local Wesleyan Methodist Church and William became the Sunday school superintendent. But in 1869, William felt the urge to work as a teacher and minister with Southern Black Americans who had emerged from slavery only 4 years earlier. He headed south to find a job, hoping to bring his family south once he was settled. His first stop was Cincinnati at the southern headquarters of the American Missionary Association. There, by chance, he met Henry Brown, president of Talladega College, a school set up in Talladega, Alabama in 1867 to educate former slaves and their children. Brown was looking for teachers. He liked William and he hired him. A year later, Henry Brown would be one of 3 people who risked their own lives to retrieve William's body from its lynching site. William journeyed with Brown to Talladega, teaching at first at Swain Hall and then supervising the construction of Foster Hall, working closely with William Savory, a skilled former slave and co-founder of Talladega College. Savory was the second of the 3 men who later retrieved William's body. Then a new opportunity opened in the area with the college's blessing. A railway company, the Selma Rome and Dalton Railroad, started to build its headquarters in Petona, Alabama. Funded by Northern money and hiring both Northern railroad workers and black Southerners, the railroad wanted a teacher to provide moral and educational influences for blacks who worked for the railroad, with the hope that some would become students at Talladega College. William took the job, but William's time in Petona was lonely and perilous. Northern railroad workers opposed his work, ignoring and insulting him, and banged on the walls of his makeshift classroom in the commissary building to disrupt his teaching. Local white Alabamans saw him as an unwelcome Northern interferer in their lives. His only respites were his letters home to Fanny and his children, who he soon hoped to bring to Alabama, and occasional visits with Talladega College friends. Things got worse when local members of the Ku Klux Klan heard that he was teaching that black women and white women were equal. Klansmen made one attempt on his life by shooting through the windows of the room he rented from a black family, but he wasn't home. So the Klan established an execution squad of 12 Klansmen, one of them a Baptist minister. They waited for an opportunity to kill their target. It arose because of a series of skirmishes between a group of young black men and a group of young white men in the town of Cross Plains. A group of semi-official white vigilantes began tracking down and rounding up members of the black group. The young black men lynched along with William Luke were hanged merely because they had the effrontery to fight against white men. Someone told the vigilantes that William had been seen and heard encouraging the young black men to violently attack whites. In fact, William had cautioned them against violence. But the Klan had its chance. Some of the vigilantes were Klansmen. They captured William. He and the black prisoners were taken to Cross Plains, where they were interrogated by local officials in the presence of a large crowd in the Cross Plains school. The hearing hadn't finished that day, so the prisoners were taken to the Cross Plains Hotel for the night. Klansmen surrounded the school, apprehended the prisoners, and marched them to an oak grove where the trees had strong, low branches. The Klan didn't have enough rope to hang all 5 men, so they hanged 3 men and cut them down to get enough rope to hang the last 2, including William Luke. William was the last to go. He was given 10 minutes to write a letter to his wife, Fanny, in Flesherton. The black prisoners were hanged from a standing position. They were simply hauled by Klansmen into the air until they choked. But in a perverse courtesy to William as a white man, they placed him with the noose around his neck on a mule. when a Klansman who had been a Confederate officer slapped the mule, William's life ended. The next day, a party from Talladega College retrieved his body. Near it, they found William's letter to his wife, Fanny. The local sheriff would not let the black families retrieve the bodies of their loved ones, and 2 days later, their remains were buried in paupers' graves. William's college friends took him to Talladega and arranged to have him buried in Talladega's Oak Hill Cemetery, despite local opposition. Officials would not allow him to be buried in the white section of the segregated cemetery, so he was buried in the black section. One can imagine he preferred to be buried there anyway. His headstone is inscribed with this biblical passage: "Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee the crown of life." The lynchings shocked Alabamans and other Americans. The crimes were investigated, but no one was found guilty of the travesty. Fanny Luke raised her 6 children in Flesherton with the loving help of her family, the Irwins. She eventually moved to Oklahoma, where she died in 1924. William Luke was largely forgotten except by members of Fanny's family and by grateful generations of staff and students of Talladega College. But in 1984, Gene L. Howard, a white Southerner born and bred, published his book, Death at Cross Plains, an Alabama Reconstruction Tragedy. It told William Luke's story. Gene Howard is an unmatched example of the best of current Southern moral acuity, and his visits to Grey Highlands to research his book left him with an abiding love of Canada. This morning, even as I speak, Gene is giving the keynote speech at the Commemoration in Talladega at William's grave. More recently, Peter Mailer, a Canadian historian, wrote an excellent article titled "William Luke, Grey County Martyr," published this year in Northern Terminus, the African Canadian Historical Journal. It's a cause for satisfaction that William's story is being retold, but it's a sad and inescapable fact that the lives of 6 other lynched men, all black, lives as deserving of life and memory as William's, will not be told nearly as well. That's no fault of anyone living today. It's the fault of history, and humans created that fault and that history. Let us do better. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, John. I'd now like to ask Rob Laverty, Executive Director of the Ontario Historical Society, to bring greetings. Rob, thank you.
Welcome, distinguished guests, and in particular, our friends in the United States, in Alabama and all across the U.S. The Ontario Historical Society is a not-for-profit, non-government organization, and we were established 132 years ago to preserve and promote Ontario's history. I was wondering what those men who were lynched are thinking of us today if they were here, and what we've learned. So I wanted to take a few minutes to share, in particular with our American friends, some of our lessons that we've learned. In the history movement in Ontario, it's very much based on dedicated individuals who are volunteering their skill and time to preserve Ontario's history. What we've had uniquely here also is that those individuals have combined with the not-for-profit sector to strengthen our movement. In terms of Black history, I'd like to just speak about a few individuals. A longtime resident here, the late, great Les McKinnon, devoted years and years to struggle to promote Black history. And I think clearly showed beyond with his research that the first non-native early pioneer settlers were of African descent. A tremendous legacy he left. I think of other volunteers like the Sheffields and the Wilsons and the Janie Cooper Wilsons, who've worked vigilantly for the last 20 years to preserve our cemeteries. And how important it is, because we all know that when invading armies go in, the first thing they do is destroy a cemetery. And unfortunately, some of the Black cemeteries here and across the province were decimated. So they're working to restore them. Our movement requires creative people to research and document. So I highlight just a few individuals like Peter Myler, his incredible work on Black history. And you've got to have publishers dedicated to overcome all the challenges of print, particularly now. And I think of Barry Penhale and Jane Gibson, who devoted their life to ensuring that Black history is published. I'd like to also thank the Grey County Black History Event, Greta Kennedy, for years, over 20 years ago, holding Black history awareness events all across Grey County. It was tremendous, and Terry Jackson from Owen Sound picking up that work. And it's tremendous, the research that's done by the Grey County archivist, Kara Noble, and her colleague, Dr. Naomi Norquay, in publishing the Northern Terminus and documenting all that history. Congratulations, you're just about to publish your 17th volume. That's the kind of record we need our movement. I'm pleased to say that the Ontario Historical Society has been publishing history since 1899, and we've just, because of the pandemic, put all of our work that we've published online now for the general public around the world to link into and read. And part of that is over 70 articles and book reviews that we've published since 1919. I'd like to speak about now the not-for-profit sector. These individuals very much are involved with the growth of the not-for-profit sector in Grey County. The Ontario Historical Society is the only not-for-profit, not-government group in North America that has the power to create other legal entities. And that came from our legislature in 1899. So, in 1979, we incorporated the Ontario Black History Society that are doing tremendous work across the province. In 1984, we incorporated the Grey County Historical Society. In 1999, I think there was great progress here in Grey County around cemeteries when we worked to incorporate the Old Durham Road Pioneer Cemetery Committee, who struggled against racism, who worked so hard to overcome obstacles, but really a shining light for the rest of the country on why cemeteries, Black cemeteries, must be restored and held in great respect. Then we moved forward to 2006. We incorporated the Emancipation Festival of Owen Sound. And congratulations, your 158th year of volunteers celebrating Black history every year. Congratulations. And in 2007, we incorporated nearby in Simcoe County the Silver Shoe Historical Society that restored and have worked incredibly hard to protect and restore the Bethel Union Cemetery there that had actually been overrun and ignored. I'd like to finally talk about a few groups we've incorporated in around 2013, the Friends of South Grey Museum and the great work you've done, and the Grey County Museum, and also Grey Roots Museum, and this museum for preserving history. We also need, of course, political leadership. Our movement needs partners, and so I congratulate, I've lived here for over 47 years, I've seen mayors come and go. I'd like to thank the great leadership of Mayor McQueen and his council, who have really shown an interest in history and realize why it's important for the health of our communities to carry on. So finally, to my American friends in particular, our movement is about volunteers who dedicate their time and their skills. We've made progress in the last 20, 30 years. Is there work to be done? Of course there is. Is the struggle over? No. But on behalf of the 500 member organizations across the province that I represent today, I want to assure you the work goes on, the cause endures, and we're here today to show our continued support for all of you and your work, and in particular, at this moment in our province's history, and in the history of the United States, we're here to show our unrelenting solidarity with you. Thank you very much, and congratulations to the Peace Committee for all your work.
Thank you so much. Now I'll ask Pat Lorenzo Faulkner, Vice Chair of the Owen Sound Emancipation Festival. She will also deliver greetings from Natasha Henry, the President of the Ontario Black History Society, and Jeff Smith, the Chair of the Owen Sound Emancipation Festival. This is the same festival that our own Joan Bajan Barry are involved with very much, and they're all way over there, but thank you. Pat.
Oh, I just was so moved by John's collection of stories he told about William Luke. I never heard it before. This is my first time, and going forward, I'm certainly going to incorporate this in my teachings of the children. What I do normally it's throughout Black History Month. So thank you, John, for bringing all that up. I really, really appreciate knowing that. As they said, I am bringing greetings from Natasha Henry. Can I pull this down a little bit more? Because I feel, is that okay? All right. And this first message is from Natasha Henry. Natasha Henry is a member of the Ontario Black History Society. And it reads, I, Natasha Henry, President of the Ontario Black History Society, am sending greetings to the Grey Highlands Peace Committee on behalf of the Ontario Black History Society. I commend you on marking the 150th anniversary of the lynching of the Scottish-Canadian William McAdam Luke from Flesherton and 7 other African American from Alabama. The names of these are Essex Hendricks, Caesar Frederick, Jacob Moore, Tony Cliff, Barry Harris, William Hall, and Green Little. And these people were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan in Cross Plains, Alabama. The story is harsh. It's a harsh example of the impact of racism against Black people because of the color of their skin, and the impact against people who believe in and work toward change intended to usher in a racial equality. The current social climate calls on us to lean. I'm getting choked up here because it really means it's hard. Okay, I'll switch glasses too at that time. It says, the current social climate call on us to learn the realities of racism that knows no border. This is pervasive, and it has deep history in Canada too. It demands for us to take action against racism in all its forms, to create a society where everyone is valued and at the same time has access and opportunities, because peace will remain elusive until there is justice. And that was a message from Natasha Henry, member of the Ontario Black History Society, and that's moving. The second message came from Jeff Smith. Jeff Smith is the chair of the Owen Sound Emancipation at this time. And Jeff says, as chair of the Owen Sound Emancipation Festival, I consider it an honor to send greetings on behalf of the Owen Sound Emancipation Festival to this commemorative wreath laying for William McAdam Luke. We would like to express condolences to the family of William McAdam Luke, Essex Hendricks, Caesar Friedrich, Jacob Moore, Tony Cliff, Barry Harris, William Hall, and Green Bill for their loss and of loved ones at the hands of the Ku Klux Klan. It is important that this commemorative event is recognizing that William was a man that loved and helped people regardless of the color of their skin. Equally important, it is the recognition of the historical fact that William and several other African Americans were lynched by the KKK because William was educating black people in an attempt to give them a better life. The result of this commemorative event is letting people know about the dark times in American history, and as such, a heinous act will never happen again. One of the main recreation in the laying of this commemorative wreath by Mayor Paul McQueen is the recognition of the 150 years of the lynching of William McAdam Luke and the 7 Americans at the hands of the KKK. I must say that William was ahead of his time. He gave his life, proving that black life mattered. And I want to thank you all for doing this, because you've taught me so much in this few minutes, all of you, and I want to thank you all gracefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Dr. Naomi Norke, I first met as a museum board member 112 years ago, maybe? Something like that. 115, thank you. And she and others have done a champion job with the cemetery on 4 and 14, and I suggest that you all, if you haven't seen it already, you take an opportunity today. So I'm asking Naomi to come and bring greetings. Thank you. Oh, and if anybody out there needs umbrellas, there's 2 here. Liz.
Thanks, Lynn, and thanks for inviting me. I actually wrote this on my dad's 1949 Underwood typewriter this morning. I love typewriters because they're so modern, because when you type, you get an automatic printout. Just saying. So I'm bringing greetings from the Old Durham Road Pioneer Cemetery Committee. This year marks our 30th anniversary of the reclamation and commemoration of the little cemetery at Durham Road and Grey County Road 14. I'm hoping that we will be having our decoration service the 3rd Sunday in September. We publish an ad in the paper about that. I'm thrilled to be part of this because I just love the way William Luke's story adds to the history of Grey County and Grey Highlands in particular. And even though we don't know the nature of the relationship William Luke had with the Black members of his community here in the former Artemisia Township, it is both heartening and enlightening to learn that this white man considered his Black students his equal. Even among abolitionists of that era, Blacks were deemed worthy of freedom from slavery, but not equality. And in this, William stood out from his contemporaries. And I thank John for all the wonderful detail that you've added about his work in Alabama. No one owns history, but I do believe it's everybody's responsibility to both learn about and embrace a more fulsome and inclusive recounting of our collective past. As we've just heard from many speakers, there's lots going on in Ontario and right here in Grey County that promotes and supports this more fulsome history. And so I encourage all of you to attend the events that have been spoken about, the Black History event, the Emancipation Festival, of course it's got an invested interest, but the decoration service, the old Durham Road Pioneer Cemetery Committee. We've actually added last year a Cultures Day tour. We hope to do it again this year. This is happening hopefully on the last Sunday in September. And last year we had stops along the road, self-guided tour where you could stop and get stories about the settlers there. And I just encourage you to take part in these, and I hope that there will continue to be local stories like William Luke's to uncover and learn from. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Dr. Naomi. And now I ask our own Robert to come and sing Amazing Grace for us. Do you want us to join in?
Well, do what your heart tells you to do.
Do what our heart tells us to do. I'll be crying.
Thanks everyone. I'm just going to get mic'd up for a sec.
This one on?
It's okay, our Mayor Paul McQueen has said if I get choked up, he will gladly sing and dance for all gathered here. He's amazingly graceful. Greg, how's that? Is this one picking up the guitar? This is just audio-visual setup music. Is that okay?
Yep.
So, like I said before, it's an honor to be here with everyone. What the Peace Committee does is what I think people should do, because peace is good. The sign out front of the museum says peace on it. And it's my opinion as a citizen and as a curator that that's something we should all be aiming at. And one thing that brings people together, I was talking to Pat about this, is music. So the song choice of Amazing Grace is something that William Luke might have sung or heard sung back then, and people have sang it since, and I sing it now. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. And 'twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. 'Twas grace that brought us here thus far, and grace will lead us home. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Thank you, everyone.
Fine Scottish Presbyterian town. I'm an immigrant. So now, I would like to bring our worthy warden, Paul McQueen, forward to bring messages or remarks. He did it again. And after which there will be a wonderful poem that I'll introduce to you. Warden, your worship, yourself. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lynn, and thank you for the great work that you're doing and for coming in and seeing us today. Before I make my remarks, I do want to thank those letters that we have read off, both from our MPP Alex Ruff and MPP Bill Walker. I stand here very proud to be your mayor of Grey Highlands, along with the warden of Grey County, in this very important day. And we're here today because we're all talking about equality and being equal. And that's, I think, the bottom line is we're all equal. I want to talk a little bit about John and his all the work he's done to bring this event today here with regards to the cooler weather. I think he did put it in we could have a little cooler today, because I tell you, it was pretty hot yesterday, and we wouldn't be wearing those masks as well as we are today. And John approached me, I think back in March, and he shared this story with me, and he asked, like, I don't know if he was asking his permission or whatever, but I certainly would much embrace what he was doing, and certainly thanks, John, for all the things you've done to bring this event today as we are here looking back, and your story. I mean, I've always had a great interest in history, but can you imagine, as John has told that story this morning, can you imagine? I mean, Canada was only 3 years old as a country, and can you imagine? I can't. I just can't imagine that, but it's true, and thanks, John, for bringing that real life, story back to us here today. And Robert, I mean, holy smokes, I give you credit for how you rhyme off all those dates in history. My wife does say that to me. She says, how do you remember those dates? But obviously, each date that you spoke about this morning has significance, and I'm sure that's how you remember those dates. And thanks again. And I do recall the time when I was at the Grey Roots, I guess not long after it opened, where I saw the video of the Black Pioneer Cemetery and that whole part of going back. And can you imagine, at the time of Canada's history, when that it was dismantled and those stones. And thanks for that group of people that had the ambition to go back and find those tombstones and bring that back together. And Naomi yourself is in the sense of what you are and in charge of bringing that forward. And again, we're just, what a great place we live here in Grey Highlands in Grey County, that we can go back and do those things that we have done. And again, to you, Naomi, again, thanks for everything you're doing with the current cemetery and bringing back all the things that, we just was at how many years back where we have the memorial now that's in place and recognizing, those representatives of that cemetery at that time. And thanks, Robert. Robert, you always do a great job. You know it, and continue that. And I know you have passion about history. You and I have talked about history, and don't stop that passion. And I know, Kevin, you're going to be speaking here in a few minutes, so I'll look forward to that along with Reverend Chris Lang. So, Deputy Mayor Desai, Reverend Lang, honored guests, it's my privilege to be here today and to bring the best wishes of Grey Highlands and Grey County to you today. William Luke is one of our heroes. He did not choose death. He chose life. He chose life of a teacher in a faraway place that's right next door to us today, as our friends in Talladega, Alabama, also honored him at this very moment. We in Grey Highlands have had many heroes in our past. Just like Talladega, it has its own heroes. And we have had our prejudice and injustice here, just as they have had as well. Yet above these prejudices in both our communities, there lies a common belief in creating a better world. And just back to that part about being equal. It's not easy. People suffered and even died in pursuit of that idea. Again, being equal. But we work at it all, day after day, summer morning after summer morning, as we do this summer morning. We in Grey Highlands can't imagine the grief that Fanny Irwin Luke and her 6 children felt as they learned of the death of a husband and a father. I hope we can also imagine the grief felt by 7 families in Alabama because 7 black men faced a terrible death that William Luke faced. Grief has no color, no country. It can be shared across borders. After we hear a lovely poem written and read by Kevin Land, and after remarks and a prayer led by Pastor Chris Lang, Deputy Mayor Desai and I will lay a wreath in honor of the 6 men and their families, which is sitting behind me here. We take some comfort in knowing that we have brought together here and in Talladega by the tragedy. We together to remember, but also to commit ourselves to justice for which Luke taught and fought. In Grey Highlands, we have no grave on which to lay our wreath. William Luke is buried in Talladega, as Robert has mentioned, but the greatest memorial to William Luke in Talladega is not his tombstone, is not his tombstone. His greatest memory in Talladega College, a university that has flourished in Talladega since 1867, educating hundreds of thousands of students, and it continues to do that today. It has done this part because of William Luke's work. I offer my admiration to the people of Talladega, Alabama, to Talladega College, and to the friends gathered here today in Grey Highlands. May we honor the 8 men who died, and may we learn from them. And again, I want to speak out to the Peace Committee for all the work that you have done, and continue to do that great work that you do to bring that history back that we want to remember. And at this time, I will call on Kevin Land to share the poem with us. And thank you again.
Thank you. I start with a letter written in 10 minutes, the night that William Luke was murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. Written to his wife. My dear wife, I died tonight. It has been determined by those who think that I deserve it. God only knows I feel myself entirely innocent of the charge. I have only sought to educate the Negro. I little thought when leaving you that we should thus part forever, so far distant from each other. But God's will be done. He will be to you a husband better than I have been, and a father to our 6 little ones. There is a balance of little over $200 in the company's hands of my money. Also, my trunk and clothes are here. You may send for these matters, or let Henry come for them, as you think best. God of mercy, bless and keep you ever dear, dear wife and children. Your William. This is a poem written in response to reading that letter. I am still here in memory of William McAdam Luke. I am still here. As forgetting is made to remember that iciness of a summer night craves the warmth of a northern chill. The whistle of a train departing is not bidding me farewell. It rather beckons me to board and journey north along the line to where Fanny and my children huddle in Sunday best on an empty platform. Yes, I am still here, laid to rest in a place of unrest. But I am not alone. No, I am not alone. I am part of a fraternity, part of a new fraternity, enslaved by oppressors, free in our hearts. We are names among the nameless, revealing our very humanity before those who wear a hood. We have been led to this place. We find ourselves at a place where we stand waiting to be born. Each man in his turn, called to be a brother, an identical brother, joined at the neck. I am still here. We are still here. You are still here. We are here, still. Thank you.
If I could interrupt only for a second.
Nope.
to say that we have copies of Kevin's poem. Rather than distributing them, I will leave them on the picnic table. Please feel free to take one before you leave. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Kevin. I would like to say that when I suggested, when John and I were going through the who should be presenting, etc., I suggested Kevin. And when John contacted him, he immediately turned around and wrote that beautiful poem. So thank you, Kevin. That, I'm sure, will be in our museum ad infinitum. Now I'm asking for remarks and a prayer by Reverend Chris Lang, pastor of the Dundalk Wesleyan Church. Thank you.
Well, greetings. As shared, I'm the pastor at Dundalk Wesleyan Church. It's part of the Wesleyan denomination. Interestingly enough, the Wesleyan denomination is a merger of two different denominations, the Wesleyan Methodist Church and the Pilgrim Holiness, the Wesleyan Methodist, which William Luke was a part of. I didn't know that history. I didn't know anything about William Luke until John called me and asked, or sent me an email, I should say, and asked me to be a part of this. I've learned something. And so I want to express my appreciation to all those who labor hard to share and keep that memory alive of not only of William Luke, but those who were killed, who were murdered with him. I appreciate that you have enlarged my world and my understanding of who we are and what has happened here. Interestingly enough, I have a family connection to this area. I'm new to the area. I've only been the pastor at Dundalk Wesleyan Church for the last 3 years. And it wasn't until I was here that I discovered that I have family history in this area. And so I'm learning, and as we all are. And I appreciate all that you are doing to keep, as I said, the history alive. Well, one day, Jesus was teaching, and someone asked Jesus, what was the greatest commandment? And he answered by saying, love your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. Another individual who wanted to kind of figure out that he was following that commandment said, who is my neighbor? He wanted to make that distinction. Who am I supposed to respect? Who am I supposed to love? Who am I supposed to treat as an equal? And who can I ignore? Who can I look down upon? Who can I treat as inferior? What follows next is that Jesus shared a parable, and a parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. So it's taking stuff that we see every day in our lives and really driving home a point. And so Jesus shared a parable, probably the most well-known parable, called the Good Samaritan. How many of us have heard that story about the Good Samaritan? Yeah. And so in the story, Jesus shares about a person walking down a road, and he gets attacked, beaten up, robbed, and left for dead. And the first person who comes to see this man laying on the side of the road was a priest, was a pastor. And after that was a Levite. And he's a well-respected individual in the community, works in the temple, works in the church. Also, he was just well-known. That was someone you would respect. Both of those men, as they saw this injured man on the road, cross the road. Not my problem. I don't want to deal with it. And kept on walking past him. The third person who came was a Samaritan. Now, for those living in Judea at the time, Samaritans were considered half-breeds, unclean, because they had Jewish heritage, but other heritage as well. So they were considered like untouchable. Don't associate with them. Don't talk to them. Don't be anywhere near them. The Samaritan comes. He sees this injured man, and he has compassion. He goes the extra mile. He puts him on his donkey, brings him to an inn, tends to his wounds, leaves money with the innkeeper and says, "Hey, I will be back, and I will give you whatever cost you incur, but please take care of him." And Jesus asked the man who had asked him, "Who is my neighbor?" He said, "So who is your neighbor?" And the man said, "Well, I guess it was the one who showed compassion." And Jesus answered, "You answered wisely." Yeah. Compassion. Who is our neighbor? Ever since the beginning of time, we've tried to find distinctions. We tried to separate us from them. It could be the color of our skin, it could be gender, it could be sexual orientation, it could be the language where we were born, it could be the country, what have you. We keep on trying to divide ourselves between us and them. When we wonder about who we should be treating as equal, what comes to my mind goes all the way back to Genesis. It actually goes back to Genesis chapter 2, and it goes back to the story of Adam and Eve, where it says in the Bible that God created man and woman in his image. He's created all of us in his image. We're all equal. So I thank those who stand up, like William Luke, who have fought the good fight, who have tried to make a difference in our society. And I'd like us, as we pray, to pray for those who do stand up to the oppression that is in this world, who stand up against the evils of racism. And I want us to pray and ask God that he will help us all to see how much we are all the same. That we are all equal. We are all worthy of respect and of love. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, God, we just come to you now. We thank you that the memory of William Luke and those who died with him has not been erased by the power of time. We thank you, Lord, for those who have continued to share the story and of the stories like it. Lord God, we confess to you and ask for your forgiveness when we have not treated others with dignity, with respect, with love. And we thank you, God, for the lesson of the Good Samaritan, knowing that as we try to split hairs, there is no room and there is no exception of who we are called to love and to treat as an equal. God, we just pray for those who are experiencing these evils, and we pray, Lord, for help. Help to make our world better. And we pray, Lord, for those who have power, who have the ability to make a difference. We pray, Lord, that you help them to stand up, to oppose the oppression and the evil, to fight against it, to make the change. God, our world is not perfect. Help us to make it a better place for all to live. We thank you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. We're now going to ask Kevin Land to say the names of those that died that day. And if you're able to stand, I think it would be a nice move to do so. At the end, I'll be giving the mayor and the deputy mayor the wreath to lay. So if you would please stand, and Kevin.
The following are the names of the men who were lynched in Cross Plains, Alabama in July of 1870. Essex Hendricks, Caesar Frederick, Tony Cliff, Barry Harris, William Hall, William Luke, and Green Little. I should also mention Jacob Moore, who was beaten and beset upon by the angry mob, but who was able to recover from his injuries.
Robert, would it not be appropriate to sing one verse of Amazing Grace?
If you like.
I think everybody, I feel Amazing Grace will be, I think, really appropriate for all these people stuff.
Sure, we'll go a cappella.
Yeah, that's right.
If everyone wants to join me.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now am found. Was blind, but now I see.
Thanks, Robert.
Amen.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody. Now I ask for Colleen Bohr to come forward with words of appreciation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to thank everybody for their participation in our ceremony today. Special thanks to Mayor McQueen and the council for the support that they've given to the Peace Committee and our work. I think special thanks to Lynn for the donation of the wreath. that's been laid today. I think that that's very meaningful for our ceremony today. And another extra special thanks to John for bringing William Luke's story so vividly alive for all of us here present and for our friends online as well. Thank you so very, very much, John. On behalf of the South Grey Museum Board and the Peace Committee, I think we've all learned more about William Luke's story, and I think it's all affected us, some to some degree more deeply. The song Amazing Grace was very appropriate. Grace will bring us home. I think as people who have just learned the story, we've just taken another step on that path toward home. And I think we should share that story with everyone we meet. God bless everyone.
Thank you, Colleen. Robert, did you have anything else to say, or have you said it all?
I'll say a couple of things.
And read.
My grade 8 teacher taught our very rowdy class the expression, "There but for the grace of God go I." And what I took that to mean is that someone could be you, had the circumstances be different. So when the Peace Committee remembers William Luke and these young men and what happened to them, they're not a them, they're an us. We are an us. And sometimes you don't have to, it doesn't take very much just to stop for a second and ruminate on the idea that, you know, these people in history could be you. Imagine these people as your friends or your family. Sometimes when time passes, the hurt fades. It's just a thing that happens. So when people get together like this and we participate in this basically shared sorrow, it makes things a little more human again. And I think that that's kind of the net result of why we have history in the first place. So again, I just want to thank everybody for coming out, both in person and online. And thank you for supporting what it is that these wonderful people do here. Thank you.
I have been asked to do concluding thoughts. I have to say that when I was on Grey Highlands Council, a couple of times I mentioned that it would be appropriate for Grey Highlands to have a committee that did things like this. When my friend Paul became mayor, and I was still on council then, I brought it up again and suggested things such as, after our Remembrance Day, which for our American friends is November 11th, that on the first full Saturday afterwards we have a peace lunch where we can talk about maintaining the peace and promoting peace, etc., etc. And luckily this time, Council agreed with me, and the Peace Committee was created, and the members of it then are the members now. And I am so thrilled to introduce them. There's Liz standing at the back there, Colleen, John, who I can't thank enough, John over there. Not here is Mr. Menifee, or my comrade Menifee from the nation, to bring that side of the horrors of war. There's Robert, there's Colleen, And I believe Michelle, a staff member, is on it. Michelle has made as many of the meetings as possible and is very, very supportive. We have done a couple of things, and this event today is an example of the many, many events we wish to have that are not attached to something that has to be done every year, that the whole world does, but what Grey Highlands needs. If we hear of anything that should be recognized or is interesting, it's not necessarily a recognition, but something interesting that would interest in the history of Grey Highlands, then we talk about it. Due to COVID, it's been down to John and I by emails. Every morning I get up, there's 27 emails because the guy doesn't go to bed. Well, maybe he does now and then. His wife is successful in telling him to smarten up. And I know he can't hear me because he has a hearing impairment, but I think he did. I'm in for it. But getting our friends in the United States of America, in Alabama, involved in this, thank you for jumping forward and agreeing to this. Thank you for the photograph of the gravestone that everybody can see later when Robert sets up the section in the museum. From the gravestone, I found out that William Look was born in Northern Ireland, very near to where my mother was born. Well, to us here in this big country, it was near. To them over there, it was quite far. So, thank you to the United States and to our friends there. Thank you to everybody that attended today, even getting wet. And just thank you.